Hey, welcome back. Hour number 4. It's 9:09, Big 550 KTRS, and this is the KPLR 11.2 hour, which means you can not only listen to us on KTRS, you can download the app, one radio station. You can watch us at stltoday.com. You can also watch us at ktrs.com. But you can also watch us on KPLR 11.2. If you have an HD antenna, it's 11.2 on your TV. Or if you have Charter, it's channel 187, all thanks to our partnership with First Rule Film and Broadcast Studio here in Brentwood. Yesterday on the show, we were talking to Mike Mashansky, who is the brother of Jeff Moransky, who was arrested in 1993 and was sentenced to life in prison in 1994 for a marijuana conviction. Many people say he is the only U.S. citizen in custody who is serving a life sentence for possession of marijuana or a marijuana conviction. He has had no violent crimes, they say, no juvenile crimes, and the only thing he's guilty of is holding and or smoking marijuana. And his son was talking about how they are starting a clemency battle in which many people, a bipartisan effort down in Jefferson City, to bring attention to his case and to get Governor Nixon to sign the clemency papers. Nearly 400,000 signatures have been printed and hand-delivered to Nixon's office, as well as a bipartisan group of state senators and representatives are taking up the cause. We were talking about this yesterday, and I got a text from our next guest, St. Louis County Prosecutor Bob McCulloch, who said, McGraw, there are a couple of facts you are not aware of. So we invited him to come on the show today to explain himself. Good morning, Bob McCulloch. Welcome back to KTRS Radio here in St. Louis.
Well, thank you, McGraw. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. Then thanks for reaching out. You're always welcome on the show. You know that. You heard some of the show yesterday. What are some of the things that we got right or we got wrong?
Well, you got very little right.
Okay.
The part about the clemency was right, and that's a separate issue. But if I can, let me run through the law under which Mazansky was convicted as it existed in 94 and still exists today, and then his case in particular.
Okay.
I heard his brother say that, he had a couple of joints in his pocket, and the guy with him had 7 pounds in his coat. Right? So, but he was convicted under the drug trafficking statute, which at the time, and again now, is a Class B felony, which is punishable by up to 15 years in prison. But because he was a persistent drug offender, that ups it to an A felony, which is punishable by 10 to 30 year life in prison, and he was sentenced under that. And also, it is without parole. Whatever sentence he were to get under that statute would be without parole. He got life. So that made it without parole. Although life translates to 30 years, and I think that may not have been in effect in 1994, but it was right around that time. Right, should have been. But in any event, what happened was in his particular case, he was sentenced on that. His case, he had 4 prior felony drug convictions before he picked up the one for which he is serving time. And so they're all felonies. This is not less than 35 grams of marijuana, which is a little more than an ounce, by the way. And on his first felony, he received a fine. On his second felony, he was put on probation. His third felony conviction on a drug case, he was sent to jail. And on his fourth felony conviction, he was sent to the penitentiary. So, which is the way the law is supposed to work. It's supposed to deter people from repeating that conduct, and when they persist in that conduct, then the punishment is stiffer. So when he got paroled on his fourth felony conviction, he then picked up this case. So this was his 5th felony conviction on drugs. And he didn't have 2 joints in his pocket. He had 92 pounds of marijuana, which translates to about 40, give or take, 40 kilos. And so that's what he went to prison on.
He had the 92 pounds on him and not
Correct.
The person he was with?
Correct.
Okay.
Not on his person, but in the vehicle in which he was. He's transporting that, and that's what he's been doing for all these other felony convictions too. He was distributing marijuana. He was not a street corner a guy standing on the corner selling a couple joints to somebody or to his buddies. He was the distributor, and this case was 92 pounds. So that's what he went to prison for. And of course, the judge, I'm sure, I don't know the judge, but the judge, I'm sure, was tired of seeing him there and gave him 4 chances at least. I don't know what occurred before that. Maybe nothing, but I'm sure there was history or just experience would tell me there was probably something before his first conviction.
Did this happen in St. Louis County?
No, this happened in Pettis County in Sedalia.
Gotcha.
And so what happened is he is sentenced as a persistent drug offender. A persistent drug offender is someone with 2 or more prior drug convictions, and he had 4 prior drug convictions before he picked this one up. So then he was sentenced to life in prison, and because he's persistent, it is without parole.
I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
Right.
So they say he was a non-violent drug offender. He wasn't killing anybody. He didn't have any guns. He wasn't doing any of that. Is that accurate when they talk about this case?
Well, we can argue over non-violent or not, but it is accurate that he did not have any weapons at the time while this was going on, and no one was injured. But you get an argument over whether a guy dealing 92 pounds of weed, that the drug trade, whether it's marijuana or something else, is a violent industry. And so you get arguments from a lot of people saying, well, these are nonviolent crimes. Now, some college kid, with a bag of weed in his pocket, it's hard to argue that guy's a violent person, assuming, the circumstances are just he gets stopped and patted down and they find the weed. But a guy trafficking in 90 plus pounds of weed, he's in a violent industry. So, but that's neither here nor there in terms of the sentence that's imposed, although it may be something the judge crossed his mind.
Right. In this clemency hearing, are you involved in this at all? Has anybody reached out to you to get your thoughts and opinions on this?
No, not at all. The clemency petition is something that you file with the governor. And his case was, let me back up one other thing on this thing, too, is that because it I think plays into the clemency petition, is that even though he was subject to a potential sentence of life in prison without parole, the prosecutor on this case offered him, made a recommendation of 20 years, not as a persistent drug offender, which meant that he could have been paroled almost any time, but ordinarily on a 20-year sentence, the Department of Corrections would have kept him for at least a third of that, probably more than that, half of it. But he rejected that and wanted to go to trial. And so he did go to trial. He had a jury trial, and the jury convicted him of that. The judge then had the sentencing because he's a persistent drug offender and sentenced him to life. That's appealed, at least to the Court of Appeals. Probably not, I don't know if it made it all the way to the Missouri Supreme Court, but it may have. But if it did, it was affirmed by the Missouri Supreme Court, both the conviction and the sentence. So that, I think, is more relevant probably to the clemency petition when you look at it, that this guy had an opportunity to avoid this in the first place, get punished for it and punished severely, but avoid the situation he's in now. So the clemency petition is basically it is a petition to the governor to say, yes, he did it, yeah, he got this, he's got all that, but we're looking for you to basically commute his sentence and not pardon him. It's different from a pardon, but
right.
Commute his sentence and let him get out of prison. And that's something you take up with the governor. And the governor would be aware of all these facts also.
Right. So the state rewrote the state criminal code.
Right.
And so many of these laws have changed or grown or sort of dealt with in the 21st century in 2015. And I don't know if you know enough about all of his case and the new cases and the new laws, but if he did the same exact thing today, would he still be sitting in jail without the possibility of parole?
He would be sitting in jail if he did it today, assuming everything fell into place the way it did. The change in the law is this. Beginning January 1, 2017, the restriction on parole as it is right now goes away. Right now, it's whatever sentence you get on a Class A felony under this statute is without parole. So that's gone. But the other restrictions are there. The restriction, because he is a persistent offender also, he's got three now 5. Well, he's got 4 prior felony convictions. So if he was sentenced today or January 1, we'll say, of 2017, it would up it to a Class A felony, which also carries up to life in prison. And because of his prior convictions, he'd have to serve at least 80% of that before he'd be eligible for parole. So that comes out to about 24, 25 years.
You're a prosecutor, but if you were sitting in the governor's office and you were offered this opportunity to grant him release from jail, would you?
Well, unfortunately, there's so many other factors involved, and I don't have all of those. But what I do know about it, one big factor would be this, that I'm looking at it and saying, this guy, first of all, he's been a significant drug dealer. This is 92 pounds of weed. That's still a lot of weed by any standards. In 1992, it's a very high standard. I mean, a very high amount.
Right.
In addition to that, this guy had an opportunity. It was laid out for him. He's represented by counsel. He had every opportunity to admit his guilt, plead guilty, take a 20-year sentence, and he'd be out by now. And so, but he chose to roll the dice and put it to a jury. Now, I have no idea what factors went into his decision to do that. I'm sure what he'll tell you is that his lawyer, forced him to do it, which is nonsense. But in any event, he made the decision to take it to trial and take his chances with the jury. And as a governor, as a prosecutor, as a judge, as anything, I would be very reluctant to tamper with a jury verdict. I don't mean tamper in the criminal sense.
Right.
Jury came back, and we asked the jury to say, decide what this guy, if he's guilty or not guilty. They decided he's guilty, and they did that. Then we asked the judge to say, Judge, you've got all the factors, impose the appropriate sentence, and the judge did that. So, I think on any clemency petition, regardless of, what else is going on, everybody is a bit, I would say, you go into it, I would think, somewhat reluctant, looking at it, saying, well, maybe it is something I should do. But you go into it, I would think, at least I would, saying, I'm not inclined to do it.
Yeah. Yesterday you were listening to the show. You reached out to me. What is it you wanted to out of this interview? You wanted people to just hear the other side of the story? Was that the reason for reaching out?
I think that the clemency petition is one thing, and they're pursuing that, and rightfully so. I mean, that's their business. There's certainly everybody can do that, and if they think that's the way to go, then the way to go. Right now, it is the only way to go because all of his appeals have been affirmed, and unless there's clemency, he's going to stay where he is. So that's fine by me. I mean, everybody has the right to do that and the ability to do that. I just thought, with the statement of facts that was given by his brother yesterday makes it a very different case from reality. And so your listeners, I think, ought to know that this guy, as the brother said, had a couple joints in his pocket, and the other guy had 7 pounds on him. Reality was he's transporting and delivering and trafficking 92 pounds of marijuana. So there's a big difference. And when you look at only one other thing really is that I've been a prosecutor since the late 70s. And even when I started, every municipality in St. Louis County, the county itself, the state of Missouri, all have, as far as marijuana goes, a statute or an ordinance that says under 35 grams is either a misdemeanor or an ordinance violation. People don't get arrested on those. You don't lock them up. So, the fellow from Mizzou the other day who didn't get locked up and got a ticket, that's a common practice. People don't get locked up when they have that. They'll write them a summons and make them appear in court. Now, they might get locked up for something else. They get locked up because, they've got a bag of pills in there. Well, that's a different issue. But if all we're talking about is a small amount of marijuana, people get a summons and they're sent to they show up in court, or they don't show up in court, and then there are other issues to go with that. But people don't go to jail over those. It just doesn't happen. Now, I'm sure we search long and hard, you can find an exception to that. But those small amounts of marijuana, I doubt I'm sure we've never sent anybody that alone to jail. They just don't go.
On a bigger question, while we still have you, Bob McCulloch, St. Louis County prosecutor, lots of people talking about legalizing marijuana.
Yep.
You watch what's going on in Colorado, where you sit as a prosecutor in St. Louis County. What are your thoughts about legalizing marijuana, either as medical or as recreational?
Well, the medical is a joke, in all honesty. It's if you look at the list, there's no significant, well-accepted scientific or medical evidence to back it up. And, today's marijuana is not your father or grandfather's marijuana either. It is substantially more potent, if you will. It has a much higher THC level in it than in years gone by. And so, believe me, if it cures something, if there was solid medical evidence that said crack cured cancer, I'd be the first guy in line to make sure that a cancer patient could get that. But that medical evidence just isn't there. Now, the research ought to be going on, and I'm sure it is going on. And there is some research, with the hemp oil and the like, that it has some impact and effect on certain conditions. But I think it's just anecdotal on that. And when you look at the list of treatments for everything, it's everything from gout to stress. Well, okay, fine. In terms of legalizing it, I'm not sure. Again, when I say legalizing, I mean just removing all restriction,
right?
Which wouldn't happen. There'd still be some restriction on it. You're not going to allow a 10-year-old to go out and buy weed. Even from whether it's a government or a private issue.
Right. It would be regulated, much like alcohol.
It would be right, like alcohol is regulated. It would be regulated. So I think there's still a lot more research that needs to be done on that, and to see where it is. But at least from my perspective at this point, true first-time offenders with even felony amounts of marijuana, if you're near that 35 grams, they're not going to jail. I had kind of a standing offer out there, McGraw, that somebody can find the 28,000 or so people who are behind prison walls in the state of Missouri. If you can find the guy who's, a college kid who got caught with a bag of weed in his pocket and he's serving time for that alone, I'll do everything I can to go get him out. He just doesn't exist. That's a myth that's out there.
That is Bob McCulloch, St. Louis County prosecutor, listening to the show yesterday and wanted to throw in his 2 cents. Mr. McCulloch, you are always welcome here. Thank you for checking in. Have a good day.
I will do that. You too. Thanks.
You got it. Bob McCulloch here, St. Louis County prosecutor, texted me yesterday during the show and said, I want to throw in, you're not hearing all the facts. And so we were running out of time yesterday. I said, how about tomorrow at 9:10? He said, perfect. So there we go. That's the latest. And I'm glad he felt comfortable enough to reach out. And just like everyone, if everyone who we ever talk about always says, feel free to reach out, even if we're not talking about you. You want to say something? We'll try and give you your time to do it. 9:27 here, Big 550.